Okay, so we're back with hour 2. So we're done our little demonstration. One of the questions that came up that Matt was asking is, what happens, can we nest multiple files? So what happens, our page 1 is including or requiring our header. What happens if our header requires another file? Does that cascade all the way down to page 1? And the answer is yes. So you can nest as many files. There's really no limit to how many levels deep. We can have one file nested inside another, nested inside another. We generally want to be careful with that. We don't want to go too far with it because we can obviously confuse ourselves and make it difficult to debug if we break down our files too much, but we do have the ability to do that. And any variables we declare in one are going to be global, and they're going to be available in all of the other files that are requiring that at the same time. Okay. So I'm going to create a, I guess I should have created a Monday folder for today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and grab my files from lesson 5. So I have all of my game files plus the README that I put up on GitHub. So I'm going to copy all those files. I'm going to dump them in here. I'll just close these. So we're not actually going to use the head page 1 and page 2 as part of our video game application, but it has a demo code for how we're going to do things. So I'll just open my editor back up, open the right directory. Again, if you took my code off GitHub, you'll have to make sure that you change your database connections because it's all set up to use my local database. So your pages aren't going to show anything unless they have your database credentials in them. So here's. So now I should be able to go to my games.php. If I actually put in the right file path. So here's games. I can edit our page pre-fills, or I could go ahead and click add. So right now we're using these links to jump back and forth, but we want to add other pages on here. We really want to have a shared header and shared footer on these pages with one common navigation bar. Next week we're going to do authentication, so we're going to need a registration page. We're going to need a link for that. We're going to have a login page. We're going to need a link for that. We're going to need a log out page. So all of those links should be part of our header as well. So let's go ahead and create a shared header. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. We'll call it header.php. And we want to add in the HTML that's going to appear at the top of the page. So just like we had on head.php, we had our doc type all the way up to and including our body. So we're going to want the same things here. Probably should put in the language. I'm going to take out my closing HTML tag. We don't need that in our header. We'll open our body tag. Once again, we will put in our page title. So this is exactly what was in the head.php that we wrote. So we want to put our CSS links in here. Right now we have links to our CSS both on our game.php as well as our games.php. If I open those up, so here's the games page. So what I want to do is strip out some of the duplicated stuff here and move it into the header. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy my meta tag, my content type. That's a good thing to have in our header. So I'm going to copy that out of my games.php, put it in here. Doesn't matter whether it goes before or after the title tag. I'm also going to copy my 2 Bootstrap CSS links. I'm not going to copy the JavaScript link. Generally, our JavaScripts don't go in the head section. Where typically is the best place for our JavaScript links to go? Yeah, in the end. So later we'll build a footer and we'll move that JavaScript link down to the footer later on. So I'm going to copy my 2 Bootstrap links to the header. I'll put them maybe under the page title. Whoops, it would help if I was in the right file. These should go in. I put them in the wrong file, sorry about that. It's not head.php, we're done with this file, we don't need this one anymore. We want these things in our header.php. So we have our content type, we have our CSS links. So now in games.php, we should be able to take out all of this stuff and replace it with a simple require once function, as well as specifying that our page title should be, maybe I'll copy this video game listings. I'll just copy that title, highlight it in blue. We'll want to set that as the page title. So now I'm going to go down to my line 15 where my body opens. I'm going to delete everything, open a set of PHP tags, set page title, and embed header. So we'll keep the page title as video game listings. We'll call require once. And whoops, should probably need to close the PHP tag. So we've replaced all that HTML. We've moved it all off to the header. If I refresh the games page in the browser now, it's going to look exactly the same as it did from week 5. We shouldn't notice anything different. So I just took all of that, those 15 lines of HTML, and replaced it this way. So here's my file so far. I'm going to leave the old version up. Here it is now. Right? These are identical. So here's the version from before without a header. Now looks exactly the same. If we view the source of the page, again, we have one complete page. There's our links there are links at the top. And our CSS is still working. We want to do the same thing on our add edit page, the page we called game.php. We want to edit game.php. I just have to figure out how to get my, oh, there. So on game.php, we're going to do the exact same thing. I'll copy the title to the clipboard. The title on this is video game details. So I'm going to copy that. We're going to set that as our page title variable and include our header. So all the way down to my opening body tag. I can take that stuff out. In fact, we already now have an opening PHP tag at the top. So I'll initialize my page title. So we have basically the same commands on these two pages. We have just a different title value for each one. One of them will say video game listings. The other page will say video game details. And again, if we look at this page in the browser, it's going to look exactly the same as it did previously. So there's no apparent difference to the end user. We're just saving ourselves some code. So now if I go and add, my form looks exactly the same way it did. Still says video game details as the title. Still uses our CSS. So what we want to do now is we want to create a little navigation bar. That navigation bar will be in our header right underneath our body. So now every page that includes the header automatically gets that nav bar. So I'll use a nav tag, and we'll use a few of the CSS classes that come with Bootstrap to automatically style the navigation bar. So the class we'll use is navbar space navbar default. This will give us a gray background, a light gray background, and it will make it span the entire width of our page. So we'll do a few things. The first thing we're going to do is put a link and a title on the left side of the nav bar, and we'll make it kind of big, and we'll link it to a home page. We haven't created a default page yet, but we'll do that. Then we want the rest of our links to appear over on the right side of the navigation bar. So the first thing I'll do is just put in a link. Usually it goes to a default page. We don't have that page yet, but we will. I'll just put in a title of COMP1006 web application. To make this a little bit bigger in terms of the font, we'll use the Bootstrap class navbar brand. And the text of our link will say COMP1006 web app. So I realize if I click this link, we'll get a 404 error. That's okay. We'll build that page in a bit. That'll be a really simple page. If I go and refresh, this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is a link. If I click it, it looks for a default page that we will have to build. And notice it's a fairly large font. That's what this navbar brand class does. Puts it off to the left and increases the font size. So now we want to add a series of links. Usually we use an unordered list for this. We'll give it a class, really funky class name of navbar nav. We also want to push the links off to the right side of the page. So we'll use navbar-right. And then we can put items inside of the list. So for starters, our first link can say, our first link will go to game.php. We'll give it a title of add a game, and the text can say add game. So if I refresh my page, this should create a link that says add game, and that link will appear over on the right side of our navigation bar. So here it is over on the right. Let's add a second link here that goes to our games page. So one link will say add and one link will say view, or you could make them say list if you prefer. So this will create a second link over on the right side of our navigation bar. So there's no PHP here. This is just straight HTML and applying a few of the Bootstrap classes for formatting. So now we've got add and we've got view. So now I can start to navigate around here. And we can get rid of these little links. We don't need these anymore. So our header's almost finished. There's one other thing I want to do. After our actually, there's two things that I want to do. After our nav section, let's open a main tag. So this says what comes below is the main content of the page. So we'll say main and we'll use a class of container. But we're not going to have the ending main tag here. Take that out. So the individual page content will always be nested inside of this main section. You won't really see any visible change yet when we add this. Actually, sorry, we do a little bit, we get a little bit of padding. Notice this gets pushed over a bit when we use that class of container. It gives us some padding on the left and right and centers our content. So now I'm going to remove this link. We don't need it. And on this page, I want to remove this link. We now have links in our navigation bar instead. So I'm going to go to games.php. And this link on line 8, let's get rid of it. We don't need it. And then I'll go to game.php. And on here, we have a link. I've got it on line 45 that says view games. I can get rid of that link. That was kind of our substitute while we didn't have a navigation bar. So there was a link above our form on game.php. And there was a link above our table on games.php. So we could just get rid of both of those. Now we can use the links in our header instead. If I go back to my browser now. So these links are gone. The link we had here is gone. And the link we had here is gone. We're using our nav bar instead. Everybody with me? Anybody have questions so far? Sorry, it's slow or it died? It exploded. Is the file in the same directory? And you've named it correctly? It is case sensitive as well. Now this page is coming up, and actually we'll build our default page in a minute. What I also want to do now is build a quick footer. So let's build a footer and share that on the bottom. So let's make a new file. Let's make a new PHP file. We'll call it footer.php. What HTML tag should we have in here? What should go at the very bottom of the page? So we're going to close the body. We'll close HTML. We also opened something else on header. We opened the main tag. After our page content, we now in the footer, before we close the body, notice main is inside of body. We need to close that main tag as well. So what we want in here is let's add, just like we have a nav section in the header, we have a footer section in the footer. I'll give it a class. We use Bootstrap to give it a background. I'll give it a class of alert, let's say alert info. That should make it a light blue background. And I'll put in here maybe a copyright. We'll just put in a little description of what we're doing. I'll put my name in here. So sort of standard copy that might appear along the bottom of a website. Yep, you could do that if you want. We could do that, yep. So what do we need to do to get this footer to show up on our game and games pages at the bottom? Yes, so let's go into those two pages. At the bottom, you'll take out the ending body tag, and you'll require or include the footer instead. Pardon? Nope. It has to be inside because require or include our PHP functions. So I'll go to games, I'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. I'll take out those two HTML tags on lines 46 and 47. And now before I close my PHP tag, embed footer. So require once. And I'll want to do the same thing on game.php. So I'll go all the way to the bottom. Now there are no PHP tags here, Liz. So on this page, we're going to need to create the PHP tags around it. Games had a PHP tag already at the bottom. So now we need to open set of PHP tags. That's right, because those tags now are coming from the footer instead. Doesn't matter if we do this on multiple lines. You can write it all on one line if you like, whatever style you prefer. So now, there's our footer. I'm not sure, so there's why we get that blue background. I'm not sure I like having it centered here. How could we change it so the footer spans the whole page like our header does, like our nav bar does? We could change something in the footer. Why is this footer kind of centered and not spanning 100% of the width because it's inside of what other section? Yeah, we've got it inside of the main. We want the footer outside or after the main. So I'm going to move that closing main tag. Maybe put in a comment here. Rather than being inside the main section, which has padding, we want the footer to come after so it spans the entire page. There, that's better. I am getting this little horizontal scroll here, which we'll fix, but I won't worry about for right now. So now this is starting to come together. It's actually starting to look like a web application, right? We have a shared header, we have a shared footer, we have a navigation bar that lets us move around. And we've made our code modular now. If we want to change that header, which we're going to in a minute, we only have to change one place. Let's do one more thing. Let's add a little icon here to our header. So if you go to, I want you to go here, do a search for font awesome. And that'll take us to, or we can just go to, oh, there's the old one. Sorry, we do want to go. So the URL is fontawesome.io/3.2.1. This is the new version. These are icons that are designed to work with Bootstrap themes. Well, we're using Bootstrap for CSS, so these icons are going to play nicely with our site. And there's a whole bunch of icons here. So if I click on, I think it's under web application icons, we're building a video game, and they actually have somewhere here. Where is it? I'll just do a find. Right here. They actually have a little gamer icon. So we want to include this icon in our header up beside where it says COMP1006 web app. So what we can use, there's a link. We click on Get Started. There's a link. So if we click on Get Started, there are these two links here that allow us to link to the Font Awesome CSS. So I'm just going to highlight and copy these two links. So again, I just clicked on the Get Started link on the top. Scroll down to where it says Easiest Bootstrap CDN, and I've copied these two CSS links. I'll go to header.php, and underneath my Bootstrap CSS, so by linking to these, we now have access to any of the icons in that 300 plus set of icons. Okay. I went to fontawesome.io.3.2.1. Okay. So that takes me here, which is the home page. You see this? Click on Get Started. It's the second link in the navigation bar. Yep, under easiest, it says Bootstrap CDN. And right here, it says #1, paste the following code into the head section of your site's HTML. So grab those two lines. Into our header.php, inside of the head section, but after the Bootstrap CSS links we already have. So then I'm going to modify this line 21, where I have the text of my link. It says COMP1006 web app. See where my cursor's flashing? I'm just going to put in before here. I'll just put it on a new line. If I use an I class, with a class of, I think it's icon, they called it gamepad. I can set the size. They have different sizes. I'm just adding this little icon and a space. I'll highlight the code I've added. So what you see highlighted in blue, that should generate their little game player console icon as part of our site logo. So that stuff in blue, that's the new code, along with lines 13 and 14. Let's try this out and see how it looks. So now we get our little game player console, pulling the icon from the Font Awesome style sheet. So there's tons of icons here. They have different sizes, so you can use them for buttons, you can use them for other visual cues, and they're designed to work with Bootstrap.
Can you go to the bottom of the page?
So I've taken out the end body and end HTML tags, which are at the bottom, and I've added line 47 inside the closing PHP tag. What does the error say?
Require one footer failed to open stream.
So if it says no such file or stream, it means the file you're linking to doesn't exist with that name. So it means you either didn't upload the file or it's not named correctly. Almost time for a break. We're going to do one more thing really quickly. We need to build this page. This will be really simple. When I click, this should take us to like a home page that kind of has our header, has our footer, and maybe just has a description of what our site is all about. So what we're going to do is build a really simple default.php that has our header and footer and just has a little bit of HTML text in the middle. So I'm going to make a new PHP file, which I want to call default. The first thing we'll do here, set the page title. You can make the home page title be anything you like. I'll set it up this way. And we'll link our header. So that's the top of our page. We don't need a main section because we already have a main section opened on the header and closed on the footer. What should we do down at the bottom of this page? Yeah, let's require our footer. So if we load this right now, it's going to load. Our little link in the top left is going to work, but all we're going to have is the header and the footer. There's no content in this page at all. So we've set the title, we've embedded the header, and we've embedded the footer. This should work now if I refresh. Here's our page. I'm just going to put a little bit of content in the middle as a home page. So in here, I'll create a div. I'll use Bootstrap to style it. I'm going to give it a class of Jumbotron, which will make it wide. It'll give it a gray background and rounded corners. We'll put on a heading. Because there's some HTML in the middle. We're writing PHP code, then we're closing it so we can write HTML text, and then we need to open it for the footer. Okay. No different, really. If I open up our game page, we did the same, right? We have a bunch of PHP up at the top for our header and for looking up a game. Then it closes so we can build our HTML form, and then we're putting PHP in the middle. Very good question. So I'll just put in here a paragraph. You can put in anything you want here. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. But you can say whatever you want about your website. You might want to put in something useful. So if you're going for a job interview and you want to show this site, you have a little description of what we're doing here in class. You do not have to copy my text at all. So just some static HTML that describes our site. So now here's my home page. Whoops, I think I might want to fix that. Maybe I won't use an H1 tag. We'll use something a little smaller. So now we've got a home page with our header and footer. And we can navigate around.
Where did you change that H1 to?
H3, just made it smaller.
I know it's not related, but like you changed it to an H3 with using an H1 and then styling it smaller. So
We could, yeah, that would probably be better.
just for the semantics.
For the semantics, yes. I'm going to cheat for now. It is a good point. It probably should be an H1.
Okay.
So again, you do not have to copy my HTML here. You can say whatever it is you want to say. Yep, you could use lorem ipsum if you want, or you can leave it blank, up to you. I just want to have a home page that's there. So we're going to take a break here. Does anybody have any questions about building headers and footers? Yes, I can put it on GitHub after. So we'll take a break now. What we want to do when we come back is we're going to use require once to do what we talked about earlier. We want to take our database connection, which we've repeated on all of our games pages. We want to move it out of each individual page and store that in a separate file. So we only have the database connection once, and then we want to link it to all our pages. So we're going to do that, and then we should have some time to look at error handling, and I'll give you your lab before we go today. Okay, so we'll come back at 5 o'clock.